Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic IHC event. I am Kate Bridle, your IHC events host, and I am so thrilled to have you with us today. Thank you for spending your breakfast, lunch, dinner time, whatever time it may be for you with us. And a special thanks to our wonderful sponsor, Ruli, thanks to whom this session is free for all of you. And I also want to thank our fantastic presenters today, Bryan Lee, Markus Hartmann, and Donna Scaffidi, who are going to talk to us about what the next generation of legal AI looks like for in-house teams. We're going to have some demos, we're going to have some discussion. It's going to be a good time. Just FYI, right off the top, this is not a CLE webinar. You don't have to worry about the form. You can just pay attention to our speakers and sit here and learn, which is lovely. So start popping into that chat, introduce yourselves. This is our 35th event of the year, and I want to know if you are with us for the first time. All right, since this is non-CLE, that's all that I have to say, which is great. I get to hand things straight over to Bryan, Markus, and Donna to talk to us about what the next generation of legal AI looks like for in-house teams. So take it away, panel.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Kate. Really appreciate it, and welcome everybody. I'm Donna Scaffidi, Head of Legal Innovation here at Ruli AI, and I'll go ahead and introduce our presenters as well. And before joining Ruli, I was a corporate and M&A attorney at both Whiting Case and Gunderson Detmer. And then I went in-house leading public companies, SEC compliance work, and all the overall legal reporting, working directly with the GC. So I've lived a lot of the workflows that those of you who are in-house counsel right now have. And today with me, as Kate mentioned, are both Bryan and Markus, who will introduce themselves.
Thanks, Donna. Hi, Bryan here, co-founder, CEO of Ruli AI. I'm sure I've seen some familiar faces before in this podcast. And so I've got a mixed background in computer engineering and law. Also did big law in-house before in my career. And then the second half of my career building products at Google and Facebook, a lot of it in trust safety, working on the early Google Assistant back in 2015, all the way to early LLM models at Google that we were using pre the ChatGPT hype. And then we're hitting our 2-year anniversary with Ruli AI now, and really focused on the in-house counsel experience. And I think we're excited to talk about, really teach you how to use sort of the Claude legal plugin today, but also where we can go beyond that and really demystify what the capabilities are from sort of general models, and what the potential is given that as well. I want to pass it over to Markus Hartmann.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Markus Hartmann, and relevant for today's discussion, before I went to law school, I was actually a helicopter pilot. I mention that because during the course of my sort of decades-long in-house career, when I saw what happened in 2022, at the end of 2022, the first analogy for me was AI felt like autopilot for lawyers. And I think that's a theme that we'll probably be discussing more today. And that's the sense that it's an assistant. It's not a substitute. That's the theme. I've spent the last year with an AI legal vendor, specifically in the securities law space. And I think that's why I'm so excited about this topic and sharing with you some of our observations when it comes to some of the general purpose tools out there versus the recommended specialized tools out there.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both. And so today we're going to do something a bit different, as Kate previewed. We're not just going to talk about AI. We're going to open up Claude Legal, set it up live, and show you what it actually does. And then to Markus's point, we'll also show you where that conversation needs to go to the next level, right? Because the real question for us in-house now is not whether AI can help legal teams. I think that's why we're all here today. It's whether chat-based AI is enough, right? And so here's our roadmap. We'll be demystifying Claude Legal with a live demo. And then we'll talk honestly about where the chat-based tool hit the ceiling and where continuous intelligence comes into play and helping to take us off of that autopilot that Markus referenced. And then we'll close with a practical framework that you can take back to your teams to use to evaluate any AI tool that you have. And so before we dive in, I think it'd be great to hear from you. And I think Kate is going to go ahead and put up a new poll for us of what's your team's current approach to using AI for legal work? And I think there's probably a variety here of folks who haven't dabbled with it yet to already using a dedicated legal AI platform, but it'd be cool to know who we have in the audience.
Yeah, and while that's populating, we do have a question, which we are going to cover. One of the questions from Bez Lomiski is Claude Legal an add-on to a corporate Claude subscription? So I think it's a great question. Don will actually cover how it's an add-on. I think I myself was surprised after finding out about it. I think people get bought into the hype and they, oh, it comes with my $20 Claude subscription, but the short answer is actually when you add it on and it's a lot of it's usage based, it actually turns out to be anywhere from 150 to over $200 a month consumption. And at that point, you're actually getting into paying for a dedicated legal AI tool, which is pretty interesting for myself to actually understand that once we dived in and started playing with it ourselves.
Totally. And it looks like and thanks for that question. And looking at the poll, it's interesting. It seems like we have most folks in this room are in the experimental phase, which is exactly where this conversation picks up. And for those who haven't started yet, do not worry, we'll take you through. And I think this is also great context for us to dive in with what a lot of you are already experimenting, and it is demystifying Claude Legal, right? And to one of the questions that we already had, what is it that you need to use Claude Legal? So there's setup, there's cost, and there's expectations, right? I'm focused on the Mac OS operating system, like literally just the actual setup of your laptop or desktop is really important for Claude Legal. Claude came out with the legal plugin. So it's a plugin back in February, so a month and some change ago. It was just set up for Mac. They recently just launched their desktop app for Windows, but keep in mind the main instances that folks have been using and debugging is on Mac, and that's what we'll focus on today. And so that first question, Bryan, thanks for handling that. You definitely need a Claude paid plan. It could be the Pro. And as Bryan previewed, from my own instance of just getting prepared for today, even in running a couple of queries, I maxed out on my Pro plan. I hit my limit and I was kicked off of Claude and needing to wait 5 hours until it refreshed. So Claude has a couple of different ways that it monitors usage. One is a time-based constraint. And so it gives you a certain set of usage limits every 5 hours that resets. And then also every week you have a total usage limit for the type of model that you're going to use. And I think for most folks who are going to use the legal plugin, you'll likely run into usage limits and you need to upgrade to the max plan.
I think we heard something. Yeah, Jess just said the same thing. She said, same, I schedule tasks, eating up my tokens like crazy. Yeah, which is awesome. Yeah, so feel free to keep it interactive. I think today is going to be a pretty hands-on session as we get into Claude, and then we talk about Rule a little bit as well. So love the engagement, and we'll call out questions as we see them.
Yeah, thank you. And the other thing too is like you need to download the Claude desktop app. This is not on the web version. And so you have to download it from the Claude.ai and you can install it locally on your machine. Keep in mind for those who are using your work laptops, right? Think about confidentiality, think about InfoSec, IT, whatever your company's protocols are. Those are things you're going to want to think about, especially as you need to download something onto your laptop versus a lot of, I would say, like specialized or tailored legal AI tools are web-based. And so you don't run into that friction.
Donna,
it's worth pausing real quick because I've had, even without legal work, there are times where there's an elegance in Claude. And I would say personality-wise, Claude is the most affirming of the LLMs. I think Claude can tell me I've got a full head of hair and stand at 6'2". But if you're in the middle of doing something important and you run out of tokens, there is probably nothing more frustrating. And if you're relying on this to make your living, that's a real limitation that I think we probably need to hover over a little bit, because that comment that we had about somebody running out of tokens, if that happens at the wrong time, it can be very inconvenient.
Yeah, and that's literally what happened to me a couple of weeks ago as I was playing around and I'm like, I'm in the middle. I need the answer to understand. And what I have to do, I either have to wait another 4 hours because I was just 1 hour into my 5-hour usage, or what I ended up doing is paying a lot more money and upgrading to the max plan. And I think, Bryan, did you say that did you have something?
Yeah, I think there are just some questions as well on, is there firm guidance on usage limits? Does this even apply for Mac subscription as well? Are there limits if you're in the Mac subscription?
Yeah. Really great question. There are limits on the Mac subscription as well.
Don, I think you were like running up bills over $250 or something at some point as you were getting really into it.
Exactly. Like I wanted to make sure I was really well prepared for today. And there's a lot of talk on LinkedIn and other avenues of folks like wanting to understand and demystify Claude, right? And I made it a priority to try to do all the ins and outs of this legal plugin. Again, I'm not practicing on a day-to-day, so my queries are probably way more limited than what a lot of folks in this room looks like. And I have definitely hit the max limit. Now the max, there's two options. You can go 5 times the limit of Pro or 10 times the limit of Pro, $100 and $200 respectively. And then there's another option that if you hit those limits, you can turn on like a pay as you play sort of feature in Claude in your settings. And what that does is anytime that you've hit the limit and you're going over and you still need Claude to function, you pay as you go. And so part of what I think for me, what gives me heart palpitations with that is it's unpredictable then the cost, right? Either I'm going to be on the max plan and eat up all my tokens, running some of those schedules like somebody in the comments mentioned, and then have to wait. And if I'm needing to wait until the sales team, hey, I can't get an answer to you or I can't review this NDA because I'm out of tokens, right? That's not the best position to be in. But I think there are some benefits to this, but I think that's part of the conversation of what we're demystifying here and where the chat functionality has its limits.
So I think that's, great. So I guess first demystification, Claude Legal is not $20. And depending on how you use it, it's not $20 a month. It could be out like closer to $200 a month. So I think that's the first thing we'll demystify. Second thing, maybe as we get into this, Donna, is I know we were going to tackle this around privilege. I'd written an article about this before and how Claude is primarily consumer facing application. Obviously, things are different. Your question around this basically, is it a closed system? Is it confidential? Does Claude AI learn on your inputs? And I think the answer there is that, like, you may have, if you're like a large corporation, say you're Salesforce or something, and you're using Claude, you probably have you will have an enterprise agreement with Claude, and you have something negotiated with them. And maybe there's some negotiation, that's okay, Claude's not going to train on the data from enterprise customers, but the consumer version, which is what you're paying for in this setup, I don't think you're afforded that protection. In an article that I wrote about as we talked with some customers, is that basically you're on click terms that can be changed at any time, right?
Yeah.
It's primarily to my knowledge, the terms are the same using the Claude Legal plugin as they are using the general Claude application.
100%.
The same T's and C's.
Yeah.
And that's oriented towards consumer data. They're gearing up for their IPO. They definitely are looking at ways of how to train on your information. I don't think you have those confidentiality protections. Also, from my trust safety experience, places like Google and Facebook, like Claude needs to keep a lot of third parties content with certain releases of information, and they could be unrelated to the legal work, right? But it could be things around child protection or other sorts of areas where there are information requests that they have to furnish. And you can just be caught up in those information requests that they provide to the FBI or other agencies. And that's what you have to do as a consumer platform. And they're oriented towards that. And they're not going to say, hey, it looks like this user might be a lawyer. Is there a privilege here we should protect? And they don't, you just wouldn't go through that process because that's not what they're designed for. Whereas a legal application is going to treat your information differently, and certainly we do, and I'm like others in the industry. So I wanted to make that clarification as well. Yeah, but Donna, please go ahead.
Totally. And I think all these questions are really relevant. And Marcus, I'm curious from your experience, we're getting a lot of attention right now with Claude Legal and in-house tools, seeming to use it primarily for drafting purposes or like as a drafting assistant. I'm wondering if you can touch on some of the maybe gaps between the marketing promise and what the day-to-day looks like when you're using, again, like a sort of general chat tool versus that specified legal tool.
I think what you've just asked about and what I see in some of the comments is what's our underlying data source? So what worries me about Claude is if you want to look at a 2-page NDA and you don't have a business that's all that where IP is that critical for those types of things, for again to use the right for consumer level legal work, which is another version of what I would call do it yourself. To be fair, I think Claude is adequate for the 100+ people that are probably listening to this or watching this right now. I wouldn't trust it as a lawyer. So one of the things that I think there are 2 sources of truth that the industry should be moving for when it comes to tools. The first source of truth is what are the actual statutes and law at issue?
Yeah.
And the second source of truth is what is my business? Like, what's the history of my previous contracts? What's the position that we've taken on indemnification clauses, on limitation of liability clauses, and stuff like that? So that's where I find, again, consumer is a great way of saying it.
Yeah.
If you're a DUI, if you're a DIY, do-it-yourself type
Yeah,
person, then I think the $20 that you spend on Claude is the right way. Once you get into the commercial plans and the enterprise plans, I think the same infirmity is there. So, that's my concern. The source of truth, the authoritative source, the basis by which the LLM goes out and does both the search part and the generative part of creating legal output.
totally. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that's, I'll go for it,
I
Brian.
love that. Yeah, I love that analogy, Marcus. I love that consumer sort of DIY. Or for me, I have some small real estate investments on the side. I can do drafting of like a lease renewal for my tenant, probably with Claude or like I'm fine with that. I'm not going to use it for and negotiating enterprise SaaS agreements necessarily. I think it's a great call out. I do have a question maybe for either you or Donna as well. Amy and Lund, just want to be clear about the legal does the legal plugin from Claude add any additional attorney-client privilege coverage? I think the answer is no, but I'd love you guys if you want to expand on that or confirm it.
Yeah. There is no attorney-client privilege with any of these tools, with Claude or in the legal plugin, ChatGPT, Gemini, and any of the sort, right? And I think that's something really important in what Brian called out earlier in his article. He talked about that privilege, right, and where that comes into play, and why should, if Anthropic or somebody is subpoenaed, why they would be turning over your documents, right, and any input that you put into the system. And that's because that attorney-client privilege doesn't exist. There's a recent court case that came out that sort of touched on this and what it means, and I'll write up on that and maybe do an office hours on that a couple of weeks if there's interest from folks. But that's a really great question, and like really want to double down. There is no attorney-client privilege. It's just a plugin. Think of Microsoft Word and some of the plugins that they offer. It's just an add-on tool to the application itself. And so Claude, Anthropic does not give you attorney-client privilege. It doesn't extend just because you and your client have attorney-client privilege as you're talking. Anything that you put into Claude from the recent court case now becomes public. And so that attorney-client privilege is void. Okay. And I think so we've talked a little bit about like what you need to use Claude. And again, like Marcus, I think
So, but yeah, so practically, and again, this is why I think if you wanted to use Claude and not hurt privilege, no problem. You just can't upload any actual documents. So the plugin itself, if you're on your local desktop, does have local data storage. So unless someone else has access to your computer, you can do that. But for those of us who've used these tools, the whole point is taking a document, whether it's an NDA or whether it's a contract, and loading it up. And the
yeah.
legal plugin basically at that point, it gets processed, that document gets processed on Anthropic's servers. And at
Yeah.
that point, I think is what Donna's talking about. That's when privilege gets lost.
Exactly. And thanks for that. And I think to Marcus's point, right, what we're as attorneys are looking to do is we don't necessarily want to scrub every document before we need to have a review for it, right? That's adding more friction to our workflow already and with all the time constraints that's being added to our day. And so one of the things that I think Claude Legal does well is that they made these slash commands and they're just pre-built-in prompts. You might have been hearing a lot about skills, Claude Legal skills. What are all these skills? It's just the way I think about it is like a prompt, and they're pre-built. And Claude Legal, the plugin, comes with 6 pre-built-in prompts. And the way that you access them once you have the plugin is you'll just hit the backslash. It will drop down which one you want to choose. You can start typing, put a B, and it will autofill brief, right? And then you can go in and drop your document. But to what Marcus pointed out, and a lot of the questions that we're having today is, once you upload your document that is privileged or has confidential information in it, keep in mind that is being processed on Claude's, on Anthropic servers and going to the web, right, in that regard. And so there are some limitations, but I think one of the things that at least out of the gate and for that sort of individual consumer experience, the 6 slash commands, I think cover some of the real workflows that we as attorneys deal with. But some of the gaps that are being raised now is around that confidentiality, the privilege protection, scaling as well, memory and team access. And we'll dive in. And I think folks have a sort of, I think, foundation understanding of what Claude Legal plugin is, but I think it's always best when we can see things in action. And so I'm going to go ahead and show everybody live. So we'll set up Claude Legal. I'll stop sharing this screen. Let's see. And where is my Claude Legal? Here we go. All right. And Share Claude Legal. Share. Okay. Here we go. Can everybody see a Claude Cowork?
Yep.
All right, perfect. Okay, so this is the Claude desktop app, right? Again, it's on Mac OS. They have recently launched it to Windows as well. And so there's three sort of headers that you use to navigate Claude. You have your regular chat, just like you do on the web interface, Cowork, and Code. And so where the Claude Legal lives is in Cowork. Claude Legal is not a separate tool. I know a lot of folks have been saying, and we say it as well, like Claude Legal, Claude Legal. It is not a separate tool. That we're just referring to is the legal plugin that Claude created. And that plugin lives inside Cowork. That's where all of Claude's plugins live, which is why you need to have the app downloaded, the desktop version. To go to plugins, you just come here to customize personal plugins. I already have legal, but you would search it, browse plugins, just search for legal, and you can see Anthropic created it. That's something I want to just call out and keep in mind. If you trust Anthropic, you're using it, great. There are some plugins on here that are not created by Anthropic, right? And so you're going to want to look at their T's and C's and understand what does it mean if you're using their plugin as well, right? And you just go ahead, add it. Here are the skills that we referenced earlier. Again, they're just like generic prompts to help you quickly customize or with your workflow. And so once you're ready, and again, like totally understand, like this can seem a little bit technical or for typical attorneys, managing the plugin, you would just click on this. You can come down here and edit it, but you do have to edit in VS Code or you can customize with Claude, right? And so there's some technical savviness to working with the tool,
Yeah.
right? And that's what we want to also talk about of it's not just plug and play, right? And I think that's some of the differences between using from an individual consumer perspective versus when you're working at a company and you have a lot of demand. Do you have time to become an engineer, Marcus?
Donna, can you expand? I'm getting some comments.
Yeah. Maybe get yeah, if you can full screen the app.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
Perfect.
There
There
you
we
go.
go.
All right, cool.
Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. I can't see the comments, so thank you. Thank you both. Okay, for folks, so here you come into customize, plugins, search, browse, just search for legal. There's Claude. And you come in here and you can customize it. If you have a great prompt that you've been using and you want to add it in here, you can go ahead and do that. But again, it is asking, I think, a bit more from attorneys or from legal professionals than what we're typically already doing. And I'm sure folks have their hand full. So you'll come into new tasks. The way that you operate Claude Legal is in tasks. And you just, again, like the backslash command, and it will show you here are all the legal skills that you can do. And so one of them that I ran ahead of time is review this contract. And so one of the cool things is I just said, hey, Claude, yes, I'm friendly with my AIs. You don't have to be. Call it the Midwest charm in me. Go blue for any fans in the audience. So I was very simple with this. I just said, hey, Claude, review contract. I dragged and dropped this contract in because Claude doesn't have, particularly on the desktop, there's no knowledge base. There's no memory for your documents. You have to drop in what you want to review at each instance, right? And I just said, provide a red, yellow, green output for me. And so it's using the skill. Again, the skill is that prompt that Claude pre-assembled. And I'm going to walk you through the output. And so you can come down here and see, here's the output. It flagged red, yellow, and green, just like I asked. And red items in here include a unilateral structure for the NDA. There's no IP protection, right? And so this is important. These are important important notifications for us, and gave us sort of the green. You'll see right here, there's no org playbook found. Again, these are just, Claude's review is just against like standard commercial terms. Why? Because every time that I use Claude with the legal plugin and I run a task, I have to upload my playbook each time. It does not know who I am. It does not know my company. And so if I forget to do it, like I didn't do this time, it's just running generic, and that's not really helpful, right? Nobody in sales wants to know what the industry standards are. We want to know, can we execute on this today, right? Based on our company standard. And so I think this is definitely useful. I think for a single review, it's impressive, right? It gives us the red, yellow, green. It's giving us some high level of different clauses from a legal lens. But again, it does not know your playbook. It doesn't know what your company values.
I also find like from a product UX perspective, as we're designing more of a tailored product, like when you scroll up, Donna,
Yeah.
on this, having the engineer side of my head and also the legal side of my head, I always said my impression of Claude Legal is it seemed like a little bit more like engineering heavy because basically they're just creating plugins for every department, marketing, HR, legal, etc. But if you look here, it says I need to extract the docx content using Python since it's a binary file. I know what that means because I've got the engineering side. Why
Yeah.
is that important to a lawyer? Like,
Yeah.
why do you need to know that? And like, why is it? It's just like, from a UX perspective, I just don't think it's quite there,
Wait,
and I don't know, like, especially if you factor in the cost proposition of it getting the realistic usage of this and you're using it heavy and it's into the hundreds per month and it's like, but again, if you're using it seldomly and you're sticking to that very low usage of 20 to 50 bucks and it's more that consumer DIY, I mean, then sure, I think you live with trade-offs of it doing great at this highlighting certain things, but like also I think falling short in a lot of things that makes like a great tailored product in my
totally.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and what you're calling out, Brian, is actually really interesting. I listened to a conversation with the sort of the CPO head of product for Claude Desktop and Cowork, and they explained that Cowork is just Claude code with a really nice wrapper around it. And so that is exactly why you're seeing a lot of technical like engineering terms and why even using it, you have to do commands and you need to do a little bit like that's how you
Yeah.
prompt. It is
Slash
because
commands.
exactly.
Yeah.
This is literally what coding engineering looks like. And
Yeah.
all of Claude Cowork is a wrapper around Claude code. So it's super interesting you caught that.
It,
And
it
again,
just, I just wanted to pause real quick because just to be fair to Claude, while we were talking, I asked it how accurate the plugin is, and this is how Claude responds, and I think everybody needs to be aware of it. The plugin assists with legal workflows, but does not provide legal advice, and AI-generated analysis should be reviewed by licensed attorneys before being relied upon for legal decisions. The plugins are currently in research preview, and Anthropic explicitly advises against use for regulated workloads given
yeah,
the agentic nature and internet access of Cowork.
that's huge. Yeah.
It's again, I've got a good relationship with Claude too. And again, besides being very complimentary, he tends to be honest. And
Yeah.
that's what he
Yeah.
just told me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just for like full transparency, Claude is my personal tool. We use it for engineering. I use it to mock up features and things. So actually, there's a number of us on the Rule team that use it as our primary tool for engineering design purposes. My designer uses
Totally.
it too to basically help him do like coding to convert designs into coding. So definitely strong in that area, which I like it for.
Yeah, and I think what Mark is like, thanks for putting that question into Claude. And I think what you're calling out with that is why the lawyer in the loop is like a non-negotiable. We need to, as attorneys, right? We and legal professionals, we have knowledge, we have experience, expertise. That's part of the reason why we have this license. And what Claude is providing, or what any AI tool or general AI tool is providing, is it's a tool to help you. Just like Microsoft Word, we don't have to be on typewriters anymore. We have laptops, desktops, we have computers. It's just another tool for us to do our work, but it does not take away the legal reasoning, the judgment that we as attorneys bring. And I think cost of an error is not just like the mistake itself. It's accountability is always sitting with the attorney at the end of the day. And I think that's exactly why like tools need to show its source and reasoning, which is important and not just the output. So that way you as an attorney have a place to go and reference and can double check its work. And I think one of the other prompts that I want to run through, we'll do a live instance, again, come to new task, is going to be a brief. I'm going to just run something live so you can see like the real-time experience. And what I'm going to do is brief, here we go, on recent. And it will ask you what type of brief are you wanting this morning if you just type the brief without the full context. And so it prompts you daily summary of relevant terms. I'm going to go ahead and skip. I like being able to just type in what I'm looking for. So go ahead and brief on recent SEC enforcement action. Shout out to all public company attorneys related to AI disclosure requirements. And again, also something cool with Claude is you can change which LLM model is doing the work for you. Why does this matter? One, it's going to impact output. Two, and I think this is also super important, this is how you can start to curb down on your cost of tokens. So the more ambitious work, if I'm doing something that's really complex, I would go up higher. But for everyday tasks, Sonnet is great, and it also keeps my costs down, which is something that you have to manage as you're using Claude's legal plugin. So let's go to work. And so you can see it's thinking through. And And as it's doing that, this is what your morning could look like if you're using Claude Legal. Like instead of spending 30 minutes scanning different news alerts, client alerts that you're getting, you can get a synthesized briefing. And what you can do is you can turn this into a scheduled automated task. And then you can have that ready every day. And so it's pulling it together, doing some live searching right now. Let's see. Okay. And so you can see that it's loading all these tools. I have it integrated with Slack, but of course, Slack, there's no results. We don't, and that makes sense. We're not a public company. There's no discussion happening about SEC disclosures or anything of that sort. And so here's my briefing, right? And here's a summary, AI washing. This is true. The SEC is actively pursuing this since about, I would say like 2022, 2023. Again, this is not legal advice, as Claude has told us from Markus. So here's a summary and overview. I'm checking to make sure, yep, Chair Paul Atkins, he's the current chairman, appointed last year. So it seems to be accurate so far. I'm not seeing where it's pulling from, right? There's no citations with it, which to me is something that I look for in how I engage with legal AI. It's giving the background here. Yep, 2024. Here is the big investigation that sort of prompted the recent charge of enforcement activity. Here we go. It's giving us stuff from 2026, which is really cool. That's present day. And so I think this is important. It's pulling together recent enforcement trends, key actions or considerations, and the implications here, right? Internal precedent, there's nothing directly related. Again, gaps. The brief does not constitute formal legal research. And yep, it's giving us the disclosure like Markus talked about. And it's giving us some next steps, which I think is important. And we can go ahead and run these. Here are the sources, which I think is interesting. I do like that the sources are down here, and it's something that as attorneys and being in the loop that we're going to want to go through and check. And so let me see one thing. Okay, it's not loading. Okay. And so I think there's a couple of different use cases that we've seen Claude used for right now. And again, like it's great for, I think, some of that general legal work that we have going on. But I think that there are some of those limitations that we've talked about. And again, that's par for the course of using any sort of AI chat. It doesn't know our instances. Markus, did you want to jump in?
There's a couple of questions, and it gets to again, that question about authoritative sources that I think it's worth talking about. And that
Totally.
is one of the reasons, I think, for those of us who grew up in an era of free LexisNexis and free Westlaw in law school, so they got us hooked,
Yeah.
is those companies have built a business vertical around being able to click directly to the authoritative source. And Dragon GC has that too. But that requires an API agreement and the ability to actually get to those sources directly. Even with Perplexity, I haven't seen the direct link to the citations. So the big caution here for me has always been just because Claude creates a citation, that doesn't mean that the citation is real. And that's where a lot of lawyers, if you think about all the sort of the press about hallucinated citations, this is that point of contact.
Yeah.
A platform has to either link directly to your sources, which is, again, that source of truth, or to the recording. Like yesterday's Supreme Court case. If you can click on the link and it's taking you right to the actual Supreme Court case, now you've got something good. I don't believe Claude or Chat or any of the commercial LLMs are doing that yet. So it's not enough that they are providing citations, because the way LLMs are working as probabilistic machines, if you ask for citations, they will give you citations. And if they can't find the right one, they'll make it up.
I do find it's interesting in this answer here. I can't remember where I saw this, Donna. Maybe it's higher in the scroll, but it actually recommends that you check with a dedicated legal tool, Westlaw or Lexis. Gaps. It's under gaps here. If you scroll up, is
There
that
you
the
go.
legal AI plugin from Claude tells you that you should consult a legal research platform like Westlaw or Lexis. So I don't know. I think it's just kind of comical how they position this, but also walk it back at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that it's calling out something that's really important. And I think a lot of us on this call here are trying to understand like all the hype around the Claude Legal plugin, Claude Legal? How do I use it? Are there benefits? And I think again, like as we're seeing, if you have someone like run of the mill, nothing like some plain vanilla work, that you can just go ahead and drop it into Claude Legal. And I think like Bryan gave his use case of things that there's no IP protection. It's his own personal sort of acting as like a solo GC for his real estate investments, and it does a great job. And I think there's definitely merit to that. And also there's pre-built-in skills. Again, those are the prompts. So you don't have to spend a lot of time prompting. I think, but again, it's not a dedicated legal research platform. And that's really important. And again, it's an AI chat.
Yeah.
And really Claude Cowork, as we talked about earlier, is really Claude code with better UX design. And
Yeah, I want to jump in, Donna, to answer some of the questions
yeah.
on the citations component, since you showed that. The questions from Nancy, Ken here, and Amy. So basically, yeah, the citations from Claude are listed at the bottom. In contrast to some other legal AI tools, there's like ours from Really, we have them embedded in line. So we do that check where it's in line in the specific sections, and then you can verify it. So there's a better tie-in. There is a potential that these sources could be, some of them could be hallucinatory, or they may not necessarily be used in the answer. It's harder to, just generally it's harder to track because you just listed the bottom. You don't know explicitly where it's used. We can show you with the answers. When you click into it, we also try to highlight, if possible, on the website exactly which paragraphs we're using.
Yeah.
The other questions we had around was, can Claude verify its own citations? I don't know the answer to that.
It's interesting.
It'll make that up too.
Okay.
No, that's what you have to run into, right?
Yeah.
You're still going to have to check and verify. Trust but
Yeah.
verify. That's really applicable here. You can ask Claude, hey, and I actually tried this the other day, like I created a task to verify different sources of UK EU law. And it was cool. It pulled up applicable laws, but I couldn't just trust what it said. I have to click in. I have to see, is it actually pulling up a real EU or UK law or whatever I'm looking for, right? It's the same thing here. You're still going to want to have to click in and look it up to make sure. Marcus.
So conceptually, one way for people to remember what's going on here is, even if you're using Westlaw and LexisNexis, which clock in at like 70 to 80% in terms of accuracy, you still have to verify the citation. There is no defense in court that says, but Westlaw said so. So even with those tools, you still have to do it. The way to think about Claude plugins or general purpose tools versus legal tools is the amount of what I call the verification tax. In other words, if you're using Claude plugin, and just like we're seeing with this discussion about citations, there's a heavier verification tax. You're probably going to have to do 2 to 3 times as much verification as if you had to with Westlaw. So that's the way to think about it is, yep, it's only $20 a month, but you're paying, in terms of your time, you're paying a verification tax because you can trust it that much less.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think that's actually, I'll just go ahead and pull up. I ran the same prompt in Ruli. And so what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and just do a side-by-side comparison of what that looks like. So give me a second to stop sharing this screen. So many screens, y'all. Let's see.
And I know we're just on a time check, maybe for Kate. Like, how are we doing on time, Kate, for this session? I know because we're getting such engagement.
Yeah, no, and we can
check
stay past the top of the hour. If you all have the time to stay, then we can hang around.
So maybe we have about 30 minutes or so from here on.
Yeah,
cool.
30 to 40. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
All
okay,
right.
that's helpful.
Perfect.
Thanks. And for folks, like if you have questions that we don't get to, or if there's more things you want to see, I host weekly office hours on Thursdays. I'll drop a link to that, or we'll send out an email with that. And also we can do more of these webinars. And so just drop a comment and we'll make sure that we try to get to everybody today. But if we run out of time, like Kate said at the beginning, we're not vanishing off the face of the earth. We'll still be around. I'm happy to answer questions. So what I'm going to do is, I'm trying to show them side by side. So maybe I'll switch between instances.
Okay. Or maybe you can just share. Yeah, sure. Really, I think we spent time on
that. I'll do that. Okay. Share. And here we go. All right. Can everybody see? Yep. Cool. Okay. So here is this sort of same question that I put in. Actually, can you see the second tab that I just navigated to?
Yeah, we can see all the tabs.
Oh,
Yep.
perfect. Okay. So this was the same question that we put it into Claude, right? Create a brief. I did the backslash brief. We're getting into our legal engineer hat in Claude, but here I can just write in plain English. Create a brief on recent SEC enforcement actions related to AI disclosure requirements. That's the same prompt that I put into Claude. What I did in Ruli is actually I just magic prompt this. You click the magic prompt button and it runs and it creates a more robust way to ask the question. And why, and that's a big thing that I want to just take a second on. The reason why Claude's legal plugin exists is really for the skills, those backslash commands. What are those that we talked about? They're just prompts. Prompts are really important. Why? Because as you're engaging with LLMs, large language models, with AI, it's all about the prompt. It's all about what you put in, right? And so that's, I think, we pull back all the layers. The real benefit with Claude Legal is it has 6 built-in prompts. Benefits of other dedicated legal AI tools is that with Ruli, you have magic prompt. You can click the button and it creates this beautiful prompt. And also we have built-in prompts
Yeah, we have a
that you can,
prompt library
a
of
whole
over
prompt
50 prompts
library
that
here.
covers a ton of areas. And you can add to them as a team. And so you can pull your knowledge and build specific prompts that could be basically workflows or checklists or processes that you do as a legal team. And we always found it to be a way for you to basically tailor legal AI for yourselves.
Exactly. And so with the prompt in place, and this is, I just did the plain English. Cool fact, Ruli does take other languages. We can talk about that at a different time. I did some stuff in Portuguese last week at another webinar. And so I just put this in plain text and magic prompted out. And so this is Ruli's response. It gave me a really robust chart, which I love to be able to see everything across. And I can go ahead and expand the table. I can save it as a doc and share it with people on my team as an Excel and share it. Also, this is, I think, what Markus coined the citation tax and the time tax that we as attorneys will run into when we're using just any sort of AI tools, especially generic AI. You have to check the citations right here, as opposed to having all the citations at the bottom. I know exactly what this particular row, every row is citing to, and I can click in and I can go and I can see the website that it's from. You can see these are law firms, these are reputable sources and sites, these are probably client alerts and things of that sort. And then I can go in and check even further. That saves a lot of time. And so it helps with that verification process as having the attorney in the loop or the legal professional in the loop. Right. And so you come in here and it's giving a very specific, the types of AI disclosure that's being scrutinized and from an SEC enforcement trends question. Right. And these are the things that it's highlighting for us to think about. It's way more robust and detailed, which I think is helpful as we're trying to think about how do we protect our company? How do we protect our business? That's the reason why you're coming into a chat to ask it these questions, right? Is to help you frame risks for your business and do your work and more effectively. And so again,
yeah, maybe I can jump in here. Something we do differently at Ruli is we can combine a search that basically uses a curated web layer. And what we describe that is we focus more on certain .gov websites and Law 250, and we do this for that rest of the world experience. So you get a more curated web layer that's more like legal, I call it legal curated approved sources. Then we additionally have primary sources for US, UK, EU, and then Canada will be soon coming in June. So what does primary direct sources mean? Primary direct sources means that you will be able to get the exact citation from the statutes or CFRs, regs, et cetera, and then even be able to browse through them. And that's that difference. From a technical side, it reduces hallucination as well if you are pairing sort of the models with the actual statutes and then this curated web layer, which leads to a lot of our customers saying that we have more precise answers. And then additionally, if you layer in the ability to focus on knowledge based on, if you click on files and sources there, you can add in effectively your integrations. So if Don clicks add integrations here, you'll be able to see that you can connect your Google Drive, your SharePoint, Box, Dropbox. So you get that institutional knowledge in addition to you can build playbooks. So you really get that universal knowledge set around what we think is the secret ingredient of unlocking institutional memory plus external authoritative sources, which is what you're doing as a lawyer. This is what we do as a company. This is what the law is outside. We want to triangulate the right answer for yourself. And what's also hidden in the background here is we have a company profile set up where you can set your risk tolerances. And for that, you're able to basically dial in for your company what are the relevant legal matters, the right posture criteria for your company, and then really we'll do that in every answer, as well as things in our regulatory monitoring, find the more relevant things for you. And that's what we talk about in terms of continuous legal intelligence, how that's really built in, where it's really a member of your team, that you're not starting from scratch on every prompt. And that's how we think of sort of the things stacking over time. Yeah, I know Marcus and Donna, we have more content on that. I don't, maybe, is this the
Well,
right time?
what I
Yeah,
was going to
you guys
say is,
jump in.
again,
Yeah.
this what you've just pointed to is what I think anybody who's watching this webinar should conceptually think about for any tool. I think Ruli is an
Yeah.
example of a quality tool precisely because of the structure. And when I say structure, to put this in terms that have really come to us in the last 3 years, or concepts in the last 3 years, we've always had search. And the one functionality that legal AI has to start with is search, and that's Google. So lawyers, long before generative AI came along, used Google to answer legal questions. And it frustrates doctors when people do that. It frustrates lawyers when somebody comes to us with their legal answer. But search is that first component. Then the generative AI component is that probabilistic calculator. Essentially, you take the search results, you throw them into the probabilistic calculator, and what gets kicked out at the other end with Claude and everybody else looks very legal. It does a good job imitating legal type output. But what we see with Ruli and what with Lexis and Westlaw and what with good legal tools is another layer. And that is the layer that structures the data in some way first. So if that's a playbook, that playbook structures the data before you get the output and thereby reduces the hallucinations. Good tools use that structure the data, like because you don't want a tool saying that a Supreme Court precedent is the same as a local ordinance. You don't want a tool that says the market trumps your own company's internal policies when it comes to
Right.
risk profiles. So the more the data gets structured before that legal output gets washed through search, generative AI, and then structure, the more accurate the tool is going to be. And whether it's Ruli, which is one of the reasons I'm a fan, or anyone looking at any legal tool, that's the analysis. That's what you need to do before you can quote unquote rely or minimize the verification tax of your tool.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, thank you for that, Marcus. I think that's incredibly important. And now might be, Kate, a really good time for that second poll that we have of just getting a pulse from folks in the room. What's the biggest limitation you have hit with AI chat tools for legal work? Is it no institutional memory, right? You have to upload that context every time, not sure it's accurate enough. And I think polls are coming in, hitting on exactly what Marcus and Bryan just talked about.
We also call it a budget being one of them.
Can you say more, Bryan, to that?
Budget. We also have someone adding in budget as another example.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think this is exactly where the general chat tools end and where that continuous intelligence picks up, where that next phase, what's beyond the chat, right? And it's that context, it's that knowledge, it's understanding your specific company's profile, your playbooks, your stance, right? And so every answer is rooted not just in the general rules that any chat, that any Google search can go out and get, but it's rooted in your company profile, your playbooks, your stance. That's what Marcus mentioned.
And again, it looks like the polling accuracy seemed, again, this is such a theme, accuracy, we're lawyers, right? So it's an OCD type profession. We are paid to be, and sometimes, and I think a lot of other tools, and whether it's the Claude plugin or some of the other, I would say, less reliable tools, they talk about speed. The real important thing in our profession is accuracy.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And okay, I think
Yeah, it looks like, yeah, the poll finish and
okay,
accuracy
cool.
is the number one reason, followed by no institutional memory, and then followed by doesn't work inside Word. My existing tools is the next follow-up. The good news is we do check all those boxes with a platform and a little bit more. I wonder if this is just some checking on time, Donna. Do you think it's a good time to jump back into slides and maybe
Yeah.
we start wrapping things up a little bit.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay. View slideshow.
So I
Okay.
would love to cover, I feel like we can cover a summary from that assistant to operating system, maybe the high level of Ruli, and then also talk about the framework of how to evaluate legal AI, which I think would be really great for
Yeah,
this.
that's
Yeah.
super helpful. And thanks everybody for the active participation. This is exactly, I think, what we're looking for. This is how I like to do webinars or just engagement is because this is a learning process for all of us, right? And so I appreciate the active comments. And again, if we run out of time and don't get to everything, shoot me a message, we'll link and we can dive in a bit deeper. And so I think from assistant to operating system, right? What we've gotten to see that in practice, but just pull that out from a more meta perspective, your AI assistant, your AI chat, it is very chat based, like we went through with Claude. It doesn't have that institutional knowledge. It doesn't have your playbooks. You have to upload it manually each time versus using purpose-built tool that has your playbooks, that has that persistent memory. And what's really cool with that is if you're on a legal team, your memory is shared across. Like if you're using Ruli, for instance, if I have a colleague in commercial who ran the first pass and has comments in the Word doc of an NDA, I can run that into Ruli with those new revisions because it's already saved in our system. Bryan showed us that we can connect with Ruli, your Google Drive, your SharePoint, your Box. And so it's updating live based on where we are today as a legal team, as a company, and then obviously as a legal industry. And so that sort of takes us to what the Ruli platform is. I've gotten to show you some side-by-side comparisons. But Ruli is this continuous legal intelligence platform, and we're purpose-built for in-house legal teams. We have the assistant, which is equivalent to a chat that you saw. But to Bryan's point, we really prioritize our sources, and it is integrated with your institutional knowledge. And so the output that you're getting is not just some generic internet search that a regular chat could do or a Google search would deliver. It is literally tailored to your use case, to your specific instances. And that's the same thing with Ruli in Word. We also have data grid. I don't know if we have enough time to show what that looks like. I can give a general overview.
Yeah, well, I think we just talk about these features as well. Yeah, it's probably the time that we have, just high level.
Totally. And so data grid is really great. What it does is you can input 300 plus contracts at once, and you can ask it to a bunch of different questions on different clauses in the contract. You can ask it, say that you have a due diligence that you need to do, like say a 21 questionnaire DD on commercial vendors, or you need to know if you're doing an M&A, where's all the IP licensing rights, or what are the notice periods across all these contracts. You can ask all those questions in one, and it will give you each column as one of those questions, and it will output each row based on all of your 300 plus contracts that you input at once.
Yeah.
And so what it does is it extracts sort of structured insights at scale with deep citations right to where in the document your clause is or where it isn't, and also provide suggestions. If something's not meeting your criteria, Ruli would say, hey, this isn't meeting it because of XYZ, and give you the rationale and explain to you what that is, and then also help you reassess or revamp that clause as needed. I think breeze through Ruli and Word, but I don't want to because I think this is really huge. This is, as attorneys, we work a lot in Microsoft Word, especially I found like when I was more a regulator of public companies, everything is Microsoft Word. Even if we had a Google account, the lawyers had Word, right? And so as half of Ruli's team is former attorneys. And so we understand like it's key to be able to like work where you actually do your work, and that's in Word. And so it's a plugin that you can download right in Word, and what it does is it spots every risk for you. You run it against your playbooks, your institutional knowledge. Again, it's integrated into your system, your company profile, and who you are, what your company is, what your risk tolerance is, how you've negotiated deals in the past. And it will give you the red line along with comments that you can go ahead and input, which I think is huge. Okay, Monitor. Monitor is one of the other really cool Ruli features. I think this is probably one of my favorite. This in Data Grid, having been a M&A attorney, that's very useful. Monitor, I think, is incredibly helpful for, especially in-house, the day-to-day questions that we get, or more of like policy, regulatory questions that we have to continue to monitor, literally monitor, right? That's what this is for, all pun intended. And so it's like our agentic regulatory scanner. It proactively tracks legislative and regulatory changes relevant to your business, and it delivers a report on a scheduled set. And so I can say, hey, what does the SEC, that question that we asked in chat, we can actually make it a monitor report. What's SEC enforcement look like around AI disclosures? And it can deliver that report to me on a weekly or monthly cadence to my inbox. And I can also add other folks from my legal team, my GC, for instance, or other colleagues who are focused on this particular regulatory analysis. Markus.
I just wanted
Yeah.
to make an observation based on one of the comments that I think really, when you go through the functionality of Ruli and you go through the structure, here's the what I believe is the most important takeaway. Somebody commented that I said Westlaw and LexisNexis come away at 70, 80%. Where does Ruli come away? It's a great question. I think Ruli has the same sort of competitive advantage that Westlaw and LexisNexis do because of its link to authoritative sources, and more importantly, because of its links to your sources. But now, and this is the part where you'll forgive the lack of humility. When I use Ruli to come up with a legal conclusion, it's at 100%. Not because I'm brilliant, it's because it's taking away a lot of the cognitive load that usually goes along with trying to do research from the ground up without a tool like that. So I would say I'm also 100% when I use LexisNexis or Westlaw, in the sense that that 70 to 80% is really helpful. But the couple of decades of legal practice that I've engaged in is why I can bridge that gap and get to what I believe is the type of outcomes that I can sign off on. I don't believe in the foreseeable future, unless we actually get to AGI, that any legal tool will approach 100%. Thank God, because I can still be employed and the rest of us can all still be employed. It's that if the tool gets you to 80 to 20, 80% and you're the human that closes that gap, that's a good tool in today's market. It's literally you're putting in good materials, you're getting them out, and you have to review them. It's like having your own fifth-year associate that's really smart but has
Yeah.
not had a lot of experience. That's where these tools, I think, shine, and that's why the functionality that we just saw just makes Ruli more and more like that practiced assistant or associate.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
thank you, Marcus. And I was also going to jump in and say that, like, I think really more of a platform. We're like a platform, a Swiss Army knife of different tools together. If you're using CoCounsel, it's effectively one tool.
Right.
Sort of like a Claude, it's a research assistant. We have a research assistant, but we also have it built into Microsoft Word. With a lot of providers, that's often different tools. With Monitor here, which is another feature that we have is fairly unique. Like a lot of people have observed that it basically replicates that second step workflow that you might be using outside counsel for, where they're giving you news alerts, but then they're giving you another bill on if you actually want to know how it impacts your policy or what you should do next for your company. So we have that really deep workflow where you add in your company policies here and we actually give you the recommendations. A lot of attorneys actually track their own questions in their spreadsheets and then are asking maybe individual questions to co-counsel, et cetera, to figure out what the latest is on a certain policy position. We've built that into the Mondo workflow. So you add your track questions in, we actually tell you the change as well. So you don't have to be tracking that manual. So I think that's really fundamentally how we're different. We're platform, it's a Swiss Army knife of tools, but also we go pretty deep in the actual workflow. So you have an assistants that are working for you rather than you're still in that prompting seat all the time. So yeah, just wanted to make that distinction.
Yeah, and I think that is, I think, really important for when we talk about configurability, right? And we talk about where are we talking about playbooks? Why are we talking about knowledge base? I think it's because that's where your risk tolerance is encoded, right? That's where your company profile sits. That's where your knowledge sits. And it helps your tool or that you're using, if it's able to capture that, like Ruli does, adapt its response to your standards, and not the other way around where you're having to then adapt everything based on Claude Legal or another sort of chat or Google searches generic output. And I think let me see. Here we go. There's another really cool feature about Ruli that's coming soon, and it's our intelligent repository, because we understand that as having as much context as possible is going to allow you to do your job more efficiently and effectively and confidently. And so you'll soon be able to host all of your contracts in here and ask questions, query it with natural language. Just like you saw with the chat, you don't have to be an expert in knowing how to prompt or anything of that sort. And you can search your entire contract repo for particular clauses or standalone questions that you have, and they'll be grouping with that as well.
Yeah, so I think there was a question around that in the chat. So earlier about playbooks. Today, you can create playbooks by dropping the standard agreement or a handful of precedents. Where this helps us take that experience next is you'll be able to drop all your contracts in here. We'll automatically group them as a source of truth. So between your amendments, SOWs, is roll up to the primary agreement. And then inside the Word plugin, we will be able to tell you how how many times you agreed to this before, et cetera, and then give you a more tailored recommendation on that red line position, as well as be able to then, as you're adjusting the positions over time, give you recommendations on how to update your playbook. So really that next level of organic, you could call it agentic assistance. So we're really excited about this next evolution.
Yep. And this is, I know you're hearing from us, and obviously we're here at Ruler, but it's not just like taking our word for it. You can see what legal teams like yours are able to do using Ruly. And I think we're seeing some teams are seeing 60% reduction in drafting time, or 3 times contract review efficiency, or being able to backfill positions, right? I think that's really important when we talk about using tools. You want to make sure that it's not adding more friction to your day to day, right? It took a lot to become an attorney, and we don't necessarily have the time, energy, or desire to become legal engineers, right? And you shouldn't have to be able to do your work. Now, folks like I think Markus and I and Bryan, we enjoy that technical side, and it's something fun for us. But again, we don't want to approach it or think, we want to think about, is this adding more friction to my workflow or not? And so some of the key takeaways, and Kate, I see you, so I think we're running right up against time. I think AI assistants like Claude and their legal plugin, they're powerful. But keep in mind, that's just a starting point. And that's why we're really talking today about what's beyond that and what do other tools really look like? What's that capability look like when you talk about chat versus something that understands your context, your company's profile? And I think the biggest thing that I want to leave us with is framework. I think a lot of folks in this room, based on polls, are evaluating legal AI, trying to understand, what do I use? Do I get a purpose-built tool? And I think one of the biggest things, number one, that Marcus, you talked about is, does it connect to your institutional knowledge? Does it understand your context, who you are, your risk profile? Or are you having to fill that in every single time? Yep.
Fantastic. Bryan, Markus, any final thoughts to build on that at all, or anything else to say before we wrap things up?
Think, yeah, no, it's a great tool. I use it. Everything that I've said has been because I've been in depth with these types of tools, especially over the last year, and authoritative sources and institutional knowledge. If you're going to integrate this into your legal advice, into your legal work, those are 2 huge pillars if you want to really credibly use these tools.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think my closing thought is the goal here was really to help people demystify what the Claude legal can do. Is such a big hype around it. And again, I think I want to encourage people to, that might be a great starting point, and that might be the right solution if you're in that consumer DIY mode. And I think getting beyond that, I want to maybe just demystify on costs. I know RV out there is very expensive. We fall somewhere in the middle. So we're, especially once you're getting into that, like you're paying over $200 a month for Claude Legal, and you should come talk to us, and you'll be surprised on where we sit in terms of pricing, and as well as you can see on the capabilities, you're going to get a ton more capabilities and trust and reliability over it. So I think really it was just helping to demystify and get people in the right spaces for what they need and wanting to provide that education.
Absolutely. And I learned a ton. I'm not practicing anymore, so I don't have to worry about any of this. But I was still like, if I was, I can imagine see all these pitfalls and all of the so this was really interesting because I think, yeah, also no matter who you are, you can't escape hearing about Claude and all of these tools and all the new things they're doing. So I found it really fascinating. Thank you so much, Bryan, Markus, and Donna, for sharing your expertise with us, for coming to demystify this a little bit. And thank you to all of you for joining us and hanging out with us past the hour. Please go to our upcoming events page. I just popped it in the chat. We've got a lot more great webinars coming up. Keep your eye on that page and show up in person when you can. Meet your fellow in-house Connect folks. And yeah, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.